Indiana football is the last undefeated team in the country. It's because they basically have no weaknesses, and that's the reason they can win the national title.
You are Locked On Hoosiers, your daily podcast on the Indiana Hoosiers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, and it is the Locked On Hoosiers podcast. I'm your man, Jacob Goins. I appreciate you being here, making this your first listen or your first watch every single day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, which is your team every day and now the number one sports podcasting network in the world. So thank you so much for making that so and for joining us on today's episode. And it's brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Well, tons to get to on today's episode. It's a big week for Indiana basketball on a 2-game skid, falling out of the rankings, and time to get back to winning. We'll talk about how they can do so against Penn State tonight and how they can also try and pull off an upset against Kentucky on Saturday. Plus, Curt Cignetti gave us a huge health update on Omar Cooper in the receiver room. We'll talk about that, plus some of the other injury concerns and how Indiana can get healthy for their first game in the college football playoff at the Rose Bowl. But people are starting to talk about this Indiana team as the number one seed in the college football playoff, second best betting odds to win the national title behind only Ohio State, who you just beat in the Big Ten championship game. And they're asking, can Indiana do it? Can Indiana actually win the Big Ten title or the national title rather? And the answer is yes. The answer is absolutely yes. And it's because they have little to no weaknesses. And I'm not saying that Indiana's perfect, because they're not, because no team is. We've seen some really good ones over the years, but every team has some flaws. But for Indiana, you've won 13 games in a row, and most of them have been by double digits. You've had some close calls in there. You had the Iowa game, you had the Penn State game, and even the Ohio State game in the Big Ten championship. You won it by 3, but the other games you've dominated, and you've really just put it on these teams. And it's because you have little to no weaknesses, and your strengths are better than anybody in the nation. Your defensive line proved on Saturday night why it's the best in the country. Your linebacker group and your secondary proved why it's one of the best in the entire country. Your quarterback is the best in the country. That's why Fernando Mendoza is about to go win the Heisman Trophy. Your receiver room is one of the best in the country, and they showed that even when they were down a man on Saturday, thanks to Elijah Sarratt and Charlie Becker. Your running back room is solid with Roman Hemby and Kalon Black. The offensive line is a concern, right? Especially with injuries and what we saw on the right side of the offensive line. But all of those things Indiana has overcome. The few minor concerns that you have, you've overcome those. You were able to overcome bad offensive line play when you went on the road to Iowa and you got that win. You were able to overcome poor offensive performance against Penn State on the road, and you still overcame it and won the game. And even in the few bad instances you had against Ohio State, you still found a way to win. Your special teams are solid, right? I know you haven't had to use Radicic a whole much, and injuries are concerning in terms of your long field goal kicker. But man, if you had glaring weaknesses, and this is my point here today, if you had glaring weaknesses on this team, if Indiana had major flaws that people weren't talking about, or even if they were talking about it, don't you think that through 13 games, dating all the way back to late August, that those would have come out, that those would have caused you to lose a football game? No matter how good your team is, if you have a major flaw in one or more areas, eventually over the length of a season, it comes back to bite you. Especially when you're playing in the Big Ten, the nation's best conference in college football. When you're playing on the road at Iowa, on the road at Oregon, on the road at Penn State, Illinois at home, right? When you're playing these teams, and then, of course, in the Big Ten championship game against who was the number one team in the country, your weaknesses would expose themselves and you would lose because of it. And Indiana just doesn't have those. Now, as I said, Indiana's not perfect by any means. Offensive line has its moments, right? Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. And I think you've seen Indiana lean into their strengths, which is run protection or run blocking, right? Creating some holes for him being black. And when they're good in pass pro, Fernando Mendoza has plenty of time. And you see him pretty much dice up any defense he's gone up against. It's when they don't give him time that you have to kind of game plan for that and get the football out of his hands quickly. And I think you saw some of that on Saturday against Ohio State. Other weaknesses, sometimes the secondary has communication issues and they have the tendency to give up a big play here and there, right? Jeremiah Smith had one on Saturday against Indiana in the Big Ten championship game. We've seen big plays and chunk yardages. Heck, we saw a lot of that in the Maryland game, if I remember correctly, where you've seen some receivers get open and the secondary have to kind of scramble. We saw some quarterback runs in the very beginning of the season in game 1 against Old Dominion. But all those things get cleaned up and they don't repeat themselves, right? That's something that makes a good team great. It's not if you just don't make any mistakes, because that's impossible to do. It's can you overcome that mistake and can you learn from that mistake and not make the same one twice? And I think that's why our buddy Brian Smith from the Portal Podcast, who joined us yesterday, was saying that he thinks Indiana has the best coaching staff in the country. And that's one of the major reasons because of it. Man, you want to win a national championship? You learn from your mistakes. You don't make many, and you learn from the ones that you do. Giving up big plays, Indiana hasn't done that down the stretch consistently. One here and there, but nothing crazy, right? You're not getting beat for 75-yard touchdowns with guys running free like we saw halfway through the year, where the corner was supposed to go. Instead, he stays back thinking he had a deep safety with him, and yet the safety's pulled to the other side of the field, and there's a receiver wide open. That's not happening anymore. Indiana's not having communication issues or timing issues or anything like that on offense. I mean, the weaknesses just aren't there. And I think Indiana is as close to a perfect team as you're going to see in college football, which is why they're still undefeated, which is why they're the number 1 seed, and why I think they should be the favorite to win the national championship. You continue to play the way you're playing, nobody can beat this team because you can't burn them. You can't attack it, right? You can't find an injured gazelle with a weak leg and go after it. Indiana doesn't have that. And that makes them extremely dangerous. But what I will say before we move on is just because you don't have them now, right? Just because there's nothing visibly wrong with this team now, doesn't mean something can't come up. Doesn't mean something can't rear its ugly head in the second game of the college football playoff or even in the first game after having several weeks off. And you got to find a way to adjust and fix that if and when it does come up. But I trust Curt Cignetti. I trust his coaching staff, and I trust this senior-led team to make the right decisions, to overcome mistakes, and still make a push to win a national title. That's why this team is dangerous. That's why this team can and should win it all, is because they really are just fundamentally sound at almost every single position on the field. All right, coming up on Locked On Hoosiers, we'll stick with football because while there may not be a whole lot of weaknesses in the game plan or the strategy or the execution for Indiana, you are trying to get healthy. And the biggest update we got was on Omar Cooper. Curt Cignetti told us what we need to know, and we break that down coming up next here on Locked On Hoosiers. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Omaha Steaks. The holidays come with 2 big goals: feeding people well and finding gifts they'll actually love. And when you want both handled in one move, Omaha Steaks is the way to go. From hosting to gifting, they deliver the world's best steak experience right to your front door. Because during their Sizzle All the Way sale, you can stock up and save in a huge way. 50% off site-wide at omahasteaks.com. And it gets even better. For you, Locked On College listeners, you get an extra $35 off with the code COLLEGE at checkout. So you've got that person who's just a grill master, or maybe yourself, you're a grill master, or whoever you want to buy something for, and you don't know what gift to get them, an Omaha Steaks package is the way to go. The steaks are perfectly aged and insanely tender. It's restaurant level right at your home. Save big on gourmet gifts and more holiday favorites with Omaha Steaks. Visit omahasteaks.com for 50% off site-wide during their Sizzle All the Way sale. And for an extra $35 off, use the promo code COLLEGE at checkout. Terms apply. See site for details. That's omahasteaks.com and use the promo code COLLEGE. Welcome back into Locked On Hoosiers. Appreciate you being here, making this your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel. You follow us on your audio platforms. And for this being your first listen or your first watch every single day, and we appreciate you making Locked On the #1 sports podcasting network. You're already living your team every day, right? But if you're looking to take it up to the next level and you can go ad-free on audio podcasting, join the Everydayer Club today. You can do it right now for Locked On Hoosiers, our Everydayer Club with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year if that's the route you want to go. You can go right now. Visit lockedonhoosiers.supercast.com. Okay, that's lockedonhoosiers.supercast.com. You can join us, our Everydayer Club for Locked On Hoosiers. More content for you, plus the ad-free audio version, or you'll find the link in our description below. So thank you for considering that. We'd love to have you on there. Something new we just came out with at Locked On, and we're really excited for that. So that's for our everydayers, and we appreciate you being here. However, you're tuned in to the podcast, and we continue on with a very important update that we got from Curt Cignetti a day or so ago in terms of Omar Cooper, right? Your go-to number 2 guy on this Indiana receiving core. And I say he's number 2. I did see someone ask, can't remember if it was in the YouTube comments or social media or wherever, but people were asking why I always say Omar Cooper's the number 2, not 1A or 1B when I'm talking about him and Elijah Sarratt. And it's a good question. It is. I just think when in doubt, Elijah Sarratt is the better receiver, and he's your go-to guy. And you saw that Saturday night, right, when you needed a touchdown and you went to him in the Big Ten championship game. You also went to Elijah Sarratt when you needed a game-winning touchdown against Iowa. But the reverse argument to that is you went to Omar Cooper when you needed a touchdown in the Penn State game because Sarratt wasn't playing in some of these games. So they're both really, really good. And I don't say that Omar Cooper is your number 2 in a disrespectful way at all. I just think if you had to throw the football to one guy, I think Fernando Mendoza is going to choose 13. But Omar Cooper could be the number 1 guy at almost any other place in college football not named Ohio State. So he's very important, and Indiana needs him to make a run and try to win a national championship. And unfortunately, right, he went down on the, 3rd play of the game in the Big Ten championship game, and you didn't have him. And you were still able to win that game, which is incredible, thanks to a guy named Charlie Becker, who had the greatest game of his college career. All right. So shout out to Charlie Becker, man. What an unbelievable player he has been for this team and was on Saturday against Ohio State. But we saw Omar Cooper go down in the 3rd play of the game with a lower body injury, and he did not return for the rest of the game. Curt Cignetti gave us an update. He said, quote, "We'll know a little bit more as we go. We don't expect it to be anything," is what Curt Cignetti said. He went on to say, quote, "We don't think there was anything that happened in the game," talking about Saturday against Ohio State, "that will affect our next game." Again, we don't think there was anything that happened in the game that will affect our next game. That's what Curt Cignetti said. He said that this week talking about Omar Cooper. And the good news is you don't play football for another several weeks. Okay. You don't play until New Year's Day in the playoffs. You get to watch people play not this weekend, but next weekend. And then you have you have the Christmas holidays off, and then you play on New Year's Day. So sure, there's concerns on that side of things, and we'll talk about that as we get closer. But in terms of Omar Cooper, that's great news. That's fantastic news. You need Omar Cooper to make a push for a national championship, because as great as it was to watch Charlie Becker play the way he did, and I'm not saying he can't do it again, but don't you want your team to be at full strength? Don't you want your 1A and 1B, if we want to go that route, talking the receivers, to be available for you on top of Charlie Becker, on top of VJ Williams, plus your running backs out of the backfield that I think, especially Roman Hemby, has proven he can catch the ball out of the backfield and be effective. And also Riley Nowakowski, you continue to throw the ball to him and good things happen. I've said that all year. But don't you want to be at full strength when you're taking on either Alabama or Oklahoma? I do. I want to be at full strength. And it sounds like, at least in the receiver spot, that Indiana's going to be. And I don't know why Omar didn't come back in the Big Ten title game. Could have been precautionary. Could have been that they really thought something was wrong, or maybe he just simply wasn't able to go. But it sounds like over the next, what would that be, 3 weeks or so, you're going to have plenty of time to get him healthy. And that's not just him. That's everybody on this team. That's the offensive line that you've had to shuffle around for weeks. That's your defense that seems to be a little worn down, yes, but playing at its best. Now you're going to get them completely healthy. Got to see what the update is on Frankie, the long kicker for Indiana, but just getting some time off in general is going to be really, really good for these guys. Fernando Mendoza, who took a shot right on the first play of the game, getting him some days off and some rest is a big deal. And it's a good thing for Indiana. And the fact that he sounds like he's going to have his full arsenal of receivers is really, really important for Indiana. And man, from what I've seen from this team, man, when they are at full strength on all sides of the football, talking about the Hoosiers here, I just don't see how we lose. I don't see how we at least are not in every game and have a chance to win. It's hard to win a national championship. And by no means do we want to sit here and be like, we beat Ohio State. Yep. Yeah, we're going to win. Ain't nobody beating us. It's the best team's ever been created. No, we don't want to act that way. We don't, because it's extremely hard to win a title. But to go back to the previous segment, one of the few weaknesses that Indiana does have, if any, is the health factor. But the good news is, and this isn't good news for these other teams, it's just a fact here, all the other teams in college football are dealing with injury stuff. It's the first into second week of December, man. Everybody's dealing with a banged up team. Everybody's dealing with season-ending injuries and long-term injuries and lingering issues, right? That's how football works. But you got to overcome those things. And Indiana, knock on wood, has been very fortunate in that category to not have major guys go down for long periods of time. Omar Cooper, heck, when you look at the stats, he's Indiana's leading receiver, right? Omar Cooper, 58 catches, 800 yards, 58 is his longest one, and he's got 11 touchdowns on the year. So in terms of yards, he's your leading receiver. Elijah Sarratt has 687. He leads the team in touchdowns with 12. But that's because he didn't play several games. And he could have gone, right? We talked about that with Sarratt. He probably could have gone in those couple of games that he missed, but how beneficial was it to have him fresh and ready to go last Saturday against the Buckeyes? It was huge. And now you're going to have both of those guys back, plus Becker and Williams and Nowakowski. I mean, everybody in the receiver room needs to be healthy. Mendoza needs to be healthy. The offensive line needs to be healthy too. And if they are, this is one of the best offenses in the country, paired up with the best defense in the country, and you feel like you have yourself a pretty good shot. So that was a big update from Curt Cignetti. Again, he said about Omar Cooper, we don't think there was anything that happened in the game that will affect our next game. Kind of weird wording. They're still looking into it, so there could be some more updates there, but overall, sounds like the Hoosiers would be good to go. You've got several weeks off before you play on the Rose Bowl on New Year's Day, and if Indiana's at full strength, paired with the idea that they just don't have that many weaknesses, I'm telling you, this should be the favorite to win the national championship. And we'll see how it goes in just a couple of weeks when the Hoosiers compete in the college football playoffs. All right, coming up on our final segment on Locked On Hoosiers, we're going to flip to the hardwood because it was a big week for football last week, but it's a big week for basketball here. 2-game skid, you need a win, and you're back to Big Ten play tonight. We talk about that and how the Hoosiers can get back on track right after this. Today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers is brought to you by Game Time. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams in the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part for events like this. That's why the Game Time app is so clutch, finally giving fans a real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Game Time, you can track price drops in real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment that they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and making going to the World Cup realistic instead of impossible. The seat view feature is my favorite. I tell you that all the time. You literally see what the pitch looks like from your exact seat before you buy. And that's for every event. Basketball, football, soccer, you name it. You can see your view from the seat before you buy, so you know exactly what you're getting. Price is included with the fees and everything is up front, which is something I love too. No last second surprises at checkout. What you see is what you pay. Take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets in every match, concert, or event with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Game Time. All right, final segment here on Locked On Hoosiers. Thank you so much for being here. I'm truly making this your go-to spot for all things Indiana athletics. And we flip to the hardwood here for just a couple of minutes because, look, football's been fun, but basketball's still going on. And if you haven't been paying attention, you're lucky because it has not been good the past couple of games for Indiana basketball. But most of you have been paying attention. And after a 7-0 undefeated start for head coach Darren DeVries in his first season at Indiana, it has turned ugly pretty quickly. You went on the road and lost to a bad Minnesota team last week, 73-64. You then go to Indianapolis and fall to the sixth-ranked team in the country, Louisville, 87-78. And the box score viewer for the Louisville game would say, all right, well, 9-point loss to the top 10 team in the country. I mean, that's not terrible, right? I mean, we competed, right? Kind of. You went down 16-0 in the first 6 minutes of the game, and you just couldn't ever come back. And all things considered, the stats actually look pretty solid. Indiana fought the entire way, and you had chances to cut it close and make this a basketball game, but you gave up a 16-point head start to Louisville, and they're too good to come to let that go. And so this is a big week for Indiana. It's a big week for Darren DeVries. It's a big week for this team. And it's a chance to get back some confidence, right? You're already 0-1 in Big Ten play, which is so hard to come back from. Only one game is not a huge deal, I understand, but you don't want to stack that, right? You had a chance to get off to a good start in Big Ten play with Minnesota, Penn State, Washington, Maryland, and Nebraska. That is 5 straight unranked teams in Big Ten play to start the conference schedule. You got to take advantage of that. And that's what we talked about in the preseason. It's difficult because of how the schedule stacks up, right? With 2 early Big Ten games in December before you get to the turn of the calendar with the full-on Big Ten schedule. And Indiana's had some much tougher early games than they had this year. But man, your first true road trip of the season was to Minnesota. I know the Barn is weird. It's a weird place to play. But you just played so bad in that game, and you let a bad Minnesota team beat you. Then you turn around and play like crap against Louisville to start the game, and you were fighting from behind the entire way. This week gives you an opportunity. You return home tonight against Penn State, who, record-wise, actually isn't bad. They're 8-1 on the season, are the Nittany Lions. But then you dive into their resume, and it's not all that crazy, okay? Their biggest win is over Navy, I would say. Fairfield, New Haven, Navy, LaSalle, Harvard, Boston U, Sacred Heart, and Campbell. Their wins are not that great. And they lost to Providence by 12 out of the Big East. And that Providence team is decent, but not great. They're 6-4. So this is not a good Penn State team. Okay, they're simply not. But we said that about Minnesota, and you lost that game. But this one's at Assembly Hall. You have a chance to get your feet back underneath you and pick up your first Big Ten win. And then we know what lies ahead on Saturday. You make a quick trip to Lexington. You head to Rupp Arena for the first time in a long time, and you take on a top 25 Kentucky team, depending on where you look. Their record stinks, and they have not played good either, but I guarantee that team will be ready to go. They'll be fired up to have Indiana walking in their building. The rivalry is renewed between the Hoosiers and the Cats. 2 teams that are not playing their best basketball right now, but man, what a win that would be. I don't care that Kentucky's down 3 of their best players. I don't care that Kentucky's playing like crap. So is Indiana. And you have a chance to get a win on the road against one of the top dogs of college basketball in the SEC. Man, that could flip everything for you coming down the stretch in December and getting into full-on Big Ten play. It starts with a win tonight at home. Take care of your home floor. Take care of business. Protect the hall tonight. Go and beat Penn State and do it and feel good about it, right? Move the basketball on offense, move without the basketball on offense, get back to backdoor cuts, get back to setting off ball screens and finding the open man, getting down low, trying to dominate the paint a little bit. I know Penn State's got some size, but man, look like a fluid offense for the first time in the last couple of weeks. And then continue to play with high effort on defense. Can you defend without fouling? It's Indiana's problem on that end of the floor. You can't stay out of foul trouble. You're going to lose games with Tucker DeVries watching from the bench. You can't do that if you're Indiana. So get back to playing fundamental basketball. I expect that to be the case tonight. And then Kentucky, look, you're going to have to play one of your best games so far, and you're probably going to have to get hot in the opposing gym. It is what it is. But man, you go 2-0 this week, and you get back in the win column, get your first win in Big Ten play, and get the upset victory against Kentucky, you're starting to feel really good about yourself. You're starting to feel good about where this season could go. You have Chicago State and Siena after that. Then you open up the remainder of Big Ten play, the restart, if you will, with Washington, at Maryland, and home for Nebraska. Those are winnable games. Yes, tough place to play at Maryland, and Buzz Williams is a great coach. But you should be able to beat two of those three easily. Easily. Then you get into a pretty tough stretch, which we'll talk about when we get there. But, man, just build some confidence again. The Louisville game was such a shot to the heart, right? The Minnesota game was like kind of a shock. It was like, man, really? Like, oh, wow. All right, that was weird. All right, here we go. Let's go play Louisville. And then you just got, you got your butt kicked. Simple enough. You've got a chance tonight against Penn State inside Assembly Hall to figure some things out. You've got to come up with a third and fourth scoring option on the offensive end, defend without fouling, get out and run. This team is best in transition. Do that tonight against Penn State. They're not ready for that. They're not ready for you to run. They're not ready for you to shoot. They're not ready for you to drop 100 on them. Do that tonight, and then worry about Kentucky coming up this weekend. But man, if you can somehow find a way to go 2-0, that would save what you just did in your 0-2 stretch. It washes it out, and then you're back on track for what could be an exciting season for Indiana basketball. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Hoosiers. Again, thank you so much for being here. Cannot express how much fun we're having here and how much I appreciate you supporting the show, whether you're subscribed on YouTube, you comment on YouTube, you like the videos on YouTube, you're following us on your audio platforms, and now you can become a part of our Everydayer Club. Check it out, lockedonhoosiers.supercast.com. No triple W, just lockedonhoosiers.supercast.com. I'll have that link for you in the comment section on YouTube and on the audio platforms as well. So if you want to be a part of that, extra content, ad-free stuff, all that, just $5 a month. Okay. We are back tomorrow, Hoosier fans, for another episode. So until then, stay safe, and I'll talk to you later.